Players and parents knew him as Joe, the friendly Zamboni driver who always waved from his ice machine and kept the rink in perfect condition for every game. But when gunmen threatened the families watching their children compete, they discovered that before he maintained ice surfaces, he'd spent years maintaining order in some of hockey's most dangerous environments. Welcome to True Human Tales. Before we begin this powerful story of hidden courage and ice rink heroism, tell me in the comments from which city in the world are you watching this video today. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, hit that subscribe button to support the channel. Riverside Community Ice Arena had served the metropolitan area for over 30 years, its single regulation-sized rink hosting everything from youth hockey leagues to figure skating competitions and public skating sessions. The facility wasn't glamorous. Concrete walls painted in faded team colors, aluminum bleacher seating that could accommodate 800 spectators, and fluorescent lighting that cast everything in the harsh glow of institutional functionality. But within those walls, generations of children had learned to skate, teenagers had discovered the thrill of competitive hockey, and families had created memories that would last lifetimes. The heart of the arena's operations was its ice maintenance, and for the past 14 years, that responsibility had belonged to Joe Sullivan. Every day, from 6 a.m. until closing, Joe could be found either driving his Zamboni ice resurfacing machine or performing the dozens of mechanical tasks required to keep a hockey rink operational. His domain included not just the ice surface itself, but the complex refrigeration systems, water temperature controls, and facility maintenance that most visitors never noticed, but that made the difference between professional quality ice and a skating disaster. At 61, Joe moved with the unhurried confidence of someone who'd mastered every aspect of his work environment. His daily routine began each morning with a complete inspection of the ice surface, checking for soft spots, cracks, or irregularities that could affect player safety. He knew exactly how much snow to shave off during each resurfacing cycle, how to adjust water temperature based on ambient conditions, and which areas of the rink received the most wear and required extra attention. Joe's Zamboni machine was a 2018 model 552 that he maintained like a precision instrument, performing daily mechanical checks and keeping detailed maintenance logs that impressed even the manufacturer's service technicians. The machine itself weighed nearly 10,000 pounds and required considerable skill to operate safely in the confined space of a hockey rink, especially during busy periods when spectators were present and timing was critical. What made Joe exceptional wasn't just his mechanical expertise, though that was considerable, but his ability to read the subtle dynamics of ice hockey environments. He could assess ice conditions at a glance, determining exactly what type of maintenance was needed based on the style of play, number of skaters, and external factors like humidity and temperature. His resurfacing timing was legendary among arena staff. Joe somehow always managed to complete his work efficiently without disrupting the flow of games or practices. Children were naturally fascinated by Joe's massive machine and his role in creating the perfect playing surface. Young hockey players would gather at the glass to watch him work, and Joe always made sure to wave and acknowledge their attention. Parents appreciated how Joe would adjust his schedule to accommodate special events and tournaments, often working extra hours to ensure that important games had optimal ice conditions. Regular users of the facility had developed genuine relationships with Joe over the years, particularly the youth league coaches who depended on consistent ice quality for safe practices and games. Coach Martinez, who ran the Pee Wee travel team, always consulted with Joe about ice conditions before crucial games. The figure skating club appreciated Joe's attention to detail and his willingness to provide the slightly different ice preparation their sport required. Joe's workspace included not just the Zamboni itself, but also the machine storage area, maintenance shop, and equipment storage that occupied the arena's lower level. His office was organized with military precision, repair manuals arranged alphabetically, tools organized by function and size, and detailed records of every maintenance procedure performed on both the ice-making equipment and the facility itself. What players, parents, and arena management didn't know was that Joe's exceptional understanding of hockey environments and crowd management had been developed in contexts far more challenging than youth league games and figure skating competitions. His ability to read crowd dynamics, anticipate potential problems, and maintain order in environments where emotions ran high came from 12 years working hockey security for professional and semi-professional teams in cities where the sport attracted both passionate fans and serious criminal enterprises. Security specialist Joe Sullivan had worked from 1985 to 1997 for various hockey organizations, specializing in what industry professionals called venue security and crowd control operations. His official record listed his specialty as sports facility security management, but his actual experience included everything from VIP protection for visiting teams to coordinating with law enforcement during games where gang affiliations and gambling interests created genuine threats to player and spectator safety. Joe had worked arenas where hockey games were secondary to the criminal enterprises that used sporting events as cover for money laundering, drug trafficking, and territorial disputes between organized crime families. His expertise included identifying suspicious behavior patterns among spectators, coordinating responses to crowd disturbances that could escalate into serious violence, and maintaining communication with law enforcement units that were often more concerned with criminal surveillance than sports entertainment. His transition to civilian arena work had been carefully chosen after experiences that had made him appreciate the pure joy that hockey could provide when criminal elements weren't involved. The Riverside Community Ice Arena represented everything he'd learned to value about the sport. Families supporting their children, communities coming together around shared interests, and young people discovering the discipline and teamwork that made hockey more than just a game. The arena's general manager knew Joe was former sports security, but had no idea of the scope of his experience with criminal enterprises that operated around professional hockey. His job application listed his background as sports facility operations and security, which seemed perfectly suited for an ice maintenance position that required understanding both mechanical systems and crowd safety protocols. What they didn't know was that Joe's workshop included more than standard ice maintenance equipment. The locked storage area behind his Zamboni contained detailed profiles of criminal activity patterns around youth sports facilities, information he'd compiled by monitoring suspicious behavior among spectators, and cross-referencing with law enforcement contacts he'd maintained from his security career. His radio system could monitor police frequencies in addition to arena communications, and his work area included emergency protocols that went beyond standard facility management. For 14 years, Joe had found deep satisfaction in his ice maintenance work. Creating perfect playing surfaces for young athletes had gradually replaced the stress of dealing with criminal infiltration of professional sports, and the steady rhythm of arena operations had allowed him to heal from years of hypervigilance and threat assessment. His greatest joy came from watching children experience the pure excitement of hockey without the corruption and violence that had tainted his earlier career. Sunday, February 18th, was the championship weekend for the regional youth hockey tournament, with teams from across the state competing in age divisions from 8 years old through high school varsity. The arena was operating at full capacity with games scheduled every 2 hours and spectator areas packed with families who had traveled significant distances to watch their children compete at the highest levels of amateur hockey. Joe had arrived at 5 a.m. to prepare the ice for the tournament's opening ceremonies and first games, performing the extensive surface preparation that championship-level play demanded. By 10 a.m., the arena was bustling with players, coaches, and family members, creating the energetic atmosphere that made youth sports tournaments special for entire communities. During the midday break between the morning and afternoon sessions, Joe was performing routine maintenance on his Zamboni when he noticed them. 3 men moving through the spectator areas with the purposeful navigation that Joe's trained eye recognized as surveillance rather than tournament attendance. They wore team merchandise that was too new and coordinated, carried backpacks that appeared heavier than typical spectator gear, and communicated through subtle signals that most people wouldn't recognize, but that Joe's security training had taught him to identify as tactical coordination. Joe's threat assessment protocols, refined through years of working venues where criminal enterprises operated alongside legitimate sporting events, began processing danger indicators with automatic precision. The men's movement patterns were wrong, They were studying facility layouts and crowd control points rather than watching hockey games. Their attention was focused on security positions and emergency exits rather than the championship games that should have been the center of attention for any legitimate tournament attendee. Joe continued his normal maintenance routine without changing his professional demeanor, but his awareness shifted into the heightened state that had once made him invaluable to security operations at venues where sporting events attracted criminal interest. He mentally mapped the arena's layout, noting family concentration areas, emergency evacuation routes, and the structural features that could provide protection or concealment during a crisis situation. The men positioned themselves strategically around the main spectator seating where hundreds of parents and siblings were enjoying championship games featuring their community's young athletes. Their placement suggested preparation for crowd control rather than game observation, and their synchronized timing indicated coordination with additional personnel who might be positioned elsewhere in the facility or preparing to arrive. At 1:23 p.m. during the peak attendance period, when afternoon championship games brought maximum spectator density, Joe's suspicions were confirmed when he observed one of the men produce what appeared to be a compact assault weapon from his backpack. The sight of military-style weaponry in an environment filled with children and families triggered Joe's protective instincts with an intensity that transcended his 14 years of peaceful arena work. That's when Joe stopped being an ice maintenance worker and became a security specialist again. Joe's response combined the crowd management expertise he'd developed during his security career with intimate knowledge of the arena's layout and systems that he'd acquired through 14 years of daily operations. His first priority was protecting the families and young athletes who had no experience with the kind of violence that Joe had spent years preventing in professional hockey environments. The arena's public address system, which Joe had access to through his maintenance responsibilities, became the primary tool for coordinating civilian protection. His voice, calm and authoritative despite the circumstances, directed families and players toward predetermined safe areas using the same crowd control techniques he'd developed for managing much larger and more volatile audiences in professional venues. Joe's service weapon, a Smith & Wesson M&P40 that had been his sidearm throughout his security career, came from the locked storage area in his workshop with the familiar weight of a tool he'd hoped never to need again in a youth sports environment. His position near the Zamboni tunnel provided excellent tactical advantage over the main spectator areas, and his years of daily observation had given him intimate knowledge of every sightline and defensive position in the immediate area. The armed men had expected to control a crowd of defenseless families whose panic would provide easy targets for maximum casualty operations designed to terrorize communities through attacks on their most vulnerable gatherings. What they encountered instead was organized resistance delivered by someone who understood both the tactical requirements of venue security and the specific layout and systems of the facility they'd chosen to attack. Joe's security training enabled him to coordinate defensive positions while simultaneously managing civilian evacuation through routes that took advantage of the arena's design features. The ice rink itself became a tactical asset, providing a central area that could be secured while families were moved to protected positions in adjacent areas of the facility. The Zamboni machine, weighing nearly 5 tons and equipped with powerful engines and hydraulic systems, became an improvised armored vehicle that Joe used to control key areas of the arena while providing mobile cover for evacuating families. His mechanical expertise allowed him to operate the machine in ways that its designers had never intended, using its mass and power to create protective barriers and control access points. Joe's radio communications, honed through years of coordinating security operations during high-stress situations, provided responding law enforcement with real-time intelligence about suspect positions, weapons capabilities, and civilian locations. His familiarity with police tactical protocols ensured that emergency responders could coordinate their approach without confusion or friendly fire incidents that could endanger the families he was protecting. Within 15 minutes, the threat was neutralized, the arena was secure, and the 800-plus families who had come to watch their children compete in championship hockey games were safe from an attack that could have devastated multiple communities across the region. Joe's immediate threat recognition and tactical response had prevented what would have become one of the deadliest attacks on a youth sports facility in American history. The evacuation procedures that Joe coordinated proved their effectiveness, as families were moved to safety with minimal panic and no civilian casualties. Parents later described how the arena staff had remained calm and professional throughout the crisis, helping children understand that they were participating in a safety drill rather than fleeing from danger that could have traumatized young minds permanently. The investigation revealed the scope of the planned attack, a coordinated assault designed to target youth sports facilities during championship tournaments when community attendance was at its highest, creating maximum psychological impact through attacks on events that represented innocence and healthy competition. The terrorists had researched tournament schedules, facility layouts, and security protocols with the thoroughness of professionals planning military operations. What they hadn't researched was Joe Sullivan. The FBI agents who debriefed Joe were familiar with his background in sports venue security and understood immediately why the attack had failed so completely. 12 years of experience managing security threats in environments where criminal enterprises used sporting events as cover for illegal activities, combined with 14 years of intimate knowledge of the specific facility and its operational systems. The media wanted to interview him about his transition from professional sports security to community arena maintenance, about the criminal elements that operated around hockey, about the moment when his two careers had intersected to protect young athletes and their families. Joe politely declined all interview requests, preferring to focus attention on the positive values that youth hockey represented, rather than the violence that had threatened to destroy those values. Riverside Community Ice Arena resumed tournament operations the following weekend, with enhanced security protocols and a new understanding of the man who maintained their ice surface. Joe returned to his Zamboni with the same quiet professionalism he'd always shown, preparing perfect ice conditions for young athletes with the same dedication that had made him a favorite among players and parents. The only visible change was a small plaque near the main entrance, dedicated to those who maintain the conditions that allow excellence to flourish. Joe had requested that it not mention his name or the specific incident, preferring to be remembered for the thousands of perfect games he'd made possible, rather than the one day when his other skills had been needed. Because some people dedicate their careers to protecting what they love, and when they transition from one environment to another, their protective instincts remain unchanged. Joe had spent 12 years protecting hockey from those who would corrupt it, and 14 years creating the conditions that allowed young people to experience the sport in its purest form. The ice was different, but the mission was the same: provide the foundation that allows others to achieve their best while standing ready to protect them from those who would cause harm. So now I ask you, have you ever met someone like Joe? Someone who seemed like just a friendly Zamboni driver until the moment they revealed the depths of their expertise and dedication. Someone whose daily presence made you feel safer without knowing why? Tell me in the comments where are you watching from today and share their story with us. And if you believe stories like this need to be heard, hit that subscribe button and help us make sure they are. We publish human stories that matter every single week. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next story. And remember, sometimes the person maintaining the ice knows more about maintaining order than you could ever imagine.